Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Gaia Intuitive. I'm really excited to bring you an episode with Debra Jordan-Kauble. She was the first central figure in Budd Hopkins' international bestseller, Intruders, The Incredible Visitations at Copley Woods. In 1992, Hopkins' book was actually made into a CBS miniseries of the same name. In 1994, she co-authored with her sister Kathy Mitchell, Abducted, the story of the Intruders Continues. And in August 2021, Debra's book, Extraordinary Contact, Life Beyond Intruders, was published. She is a former Indiana MUFON investigator, co-founded with her own paranormal group, Paranormal Underground, and along with co-founder Greg Cable, hosted the Midwest Paratalk podcast. She is a retired auto industry worker, cosmetologist, Red Cross volunteer, member of MENSA, wife, mother, grandmother, and now great-grandmother. She lives in the Midwest with her husband of nearly 30 years, her 2 Yorkies, and a cat. To show support to Deb or to contact Deb, you can contact her directly through her website, debshome.com, or you can grab yourself of Debra's newest book on Amazon, Kindle, Books A Million online, and Barnes and Noble online. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode. How are you? It's lovely to meet you.
I'm good, thanks. It's nice to meet you too.
I have spent a fair bit of time going through some of your interviews, and oh my goodness. Sometimes you like come across people where it's so similar to your experience. They almost like take the words out of your mouth and you're just like, yeah, that was the same thing I had with you. The last one I watched was Through a Glass Darkly, that interview, or that podcast. And you mentioned you were talking about some of your experiences when some of these things started to evolve and really come on stronger. Specifically, you mentioned that when you looked at people, you started, like, you could really see like the blueprint of their being, of their life and everything. And that's exactly how I experience things as well. So I just found it so interesting.
I've met a lot of people over the years that kind of do that too. And more so after experiences, I should say. I think I've always kind of been that way a little bit, but it just seems to have magnified everything. And as I get older, it gets a little stronger. I still can't control it. I can't make it happen when I want to, and I can't make it stop when I'm not in the mood, but
Well, that was, I think, another little thing I resonated with you with was that you're quite free and open in the way that you just receive. It's not sort of you go out on a quest to receive a certain piece of information and put things. You just are open just to receiving in general.
Yeah, that's the way I am. So that's the way it's going to be, I guess. It's funny because a friend of mine, Dave Marler, who is in the process of compiling all the bits of UFO history and stuff from way back, videos, interviews, printed material, all kinds of stuff. He sent me 4 videos today. There was one of me that I was on the Oprah Winfrey show back when she was, this was back before she was nationwide. She was still AM Chicago. And it was one of the very first things that I did, like way back in public. And I watched a little bit of it. I couldn't hardly stand it. I watched a little bit of it. My first impression was, oh my God, I was so young. And then my second impression was, oh my God, I was terrified. I can almost feel myself cinching up watching. And another time, there were several videos. There was one that I participated in a documentary back in the 90s, I think. And then there was one from the late 80s or early 90s. And then there was a video recording of the very first time I ever spoke in public with my real name and not Kathy Davis from Budd's book. And it just blew my mind.
One interview that I watched, and that was with Budd, I think was sitting next to you. And there
were a few of those.
And there was a lady that was interviewing you, and there was an audience, and I could feel for you because you did look reasonably terrified to speak, because the questions that were coming your way firstly were very I think quite closed and still slightly maybe judgmental in a way. And I could also resonate with the fact that you were having these experiences and things like I myself have gone through, and were not actually able to verbalize because you which makes it hard when people are pummeling you with questions and you can't answer them.
And back then, the attitude was so different then than it is now. I mean, I still get the eye roll and the occasional snide remark, but not nearly as much as I used to. And even though I say now I don't care what people think about me anymore, that's the right I've earned to be 65 years old almost. So, I don't care what people think about anything about me anymore. But back then, I was worried. I was worried that, I knew what I was talking about was crazy sounding. I thought I was crazy, but for something compelled me, just pushed me out there,
Well, I commend you on your courage to step forward and step out and have a voice. It's never easy taking that, going against the grain. But I think that maybe what a lot of people didn't know that you have touched on in more recent interviews and things is that, a lot of these experiences and things we study, we love to learn. A lot of people, particularly yourself, have very high IQ, or at least in their range, in their MENSA or whatever. And, you have done a lot of investigative work into these fields and things like that. You're not just sort of, coming up with these elaborate ideas. You've genuinely experienced and studied this phenomena.
One of the ways that I learned, this works for me, that may not work for everybody, but for me, when I'm faced with something that I'm scared of, something that terrifies me, I don't want to see it, but I don't want to not see it. I need to know where it is. I need to know what it is. And the way I deal with things like that is to learn as much about that particular thing as I can possibly find. To me, knowledge is power. And so when this all started to happen, one of the first things I did after June 30th, 83, that left the mark in the yard, that had all the the other witnesses and other things happening, was I started trying to find the reasonable and rational explanations for it, because the alternative was not something I could deal with. I just couldn't accept it. And I contacted the local, one of the local college IUPUI or Purdue University agricultural agent, and asked him about what could cause things like that make the mark in the yard. All kinds of stuff like that I tried. I could find a lot of people that could tell me what it wasn't, but no one could tell me what it could be. And from there on, I got fairly quickly after June 30, 83, I'd say by 85 or 86, I was getting involved with the local chapter of MUFON in my city. And I ended up being a field investigator, and I was actually even a state section director for a little while. I took the test for a field investigator, and I scored the highest score in my state at the time. I scored a 99 on it. So, and I remember Jerry Sievers was the state director, and he was so proud of me. But so I started to learn about, other people that had these experiences and stuff. And that was at a point where I was pretty much done with mine, trying to remember what I was going to remember. Because Bud didn't really, when I first started to work with Budd Hopkins, he didn't really want me to read any books or watch any movies or anything about this whole, phenomenon, so as not to possibly, taint my memory, or maybe I could misconstrue something as thinking it was my own and it was actually something I read, which is what I did. But once I was past that point in his investigation, then I began to look at other people's, and that's when I started to get involved in that. And through that, I did that for like 10 years. And then I started to get more interested in the paranormal side of, the whole weird phenomena and stuff. And I began to realize that there were a lot of bleed through. Yeah, there was, I found a lot of people that had these UFO experiences or alien contact experiences were having paranormal, what we would call paranormal experiences as well, like psychic stuff, or having things disappear and then reappear, and just even orbs, and have recording a lot of those, which I have. One of the things when I got into the paranormal, I kind of got to this attitude of like orbs are like 99% dust, water, moisture, mold spores, whatever, but there's 1% that I feel, it used to make one of the guys that I worked with mad, because he was like totally against orbs. And I'm like, no, that's not right. Yeah, you can explain most of them, but some of them, no, they're connected to this other phenomenon. I guarantee it. I mean, I can't prove it definitively, but I know it in my soul. You know what I mean?
And so after your first physical experience, and that was the one where you saw physically in your backyard a black craft.
Well, that was not actually the first thing that happened to me. I had some strange things happen to me when I was a kid. When I was about 6, and I went on a weekend trip to Detroit with my sister, I was missing all day long, and the police had to be called to try to find me. But my sister actually was the one who actually went out and found me. And I had spent time with this strange little boy in this strange house. It was just an odd thing. And I don't remember seeing any UFOs or walking in any UFOs or aliens, but I was with this little boy who wanted me to play with his special toys. And when I went into the house, and then I went into the toy room, the house was a normal house. The toy room was like the size of a gymnasium, and all the, so strange memories. It was confirmed by my mom and my sister that all of that happened, but my memory of it is spotty. I wasn't very old. Then when I was 17, I was out in a car with 2 girlfriends at like 3 a.m, and we were out driving around in the country. We were actually stalking my other girlfriend's boyfriend to see if he was where said he was going to be. She was a year older than me. So, and there was a light in the sky that we saw, and then it came down on the ground, and we pulled the car over. I don't remember seeing the light go down on the ground, come from down on the ground. I remember seeing it and saying, "Oh, look, that's a UFO." And I kind of laughed. But then my next memory is of the car being enveloped in some kind of black, misty smoke, and someone pulling me out by my legs. And then the next memory I have is that we're in the car driving, and it's almost sunlight, and we got to hurry up and get back so that my friend's parents don't know we were out all night before they get up and go to work. And then it was 20 years later when Bud interviewed her, and he says, "Do you remember the night that you 3 girls were out driving around and you saw the light in the sky?" And you saw the light. And she said, "You mean the light in the sky or the light on the ground?" And I looked at her, because I didn't even remember being on the ground until she said that, and it kind of triggered a memory of me. And I remember her pulling over and her getting out of the car and she said she got out of the car to get a better look at this light that was in the field, and we were in the middle of nowhere. So that was when I was either 16 or 17, or if I was 16, I was close to being 17. And then when I was married, I was a very young married woman, and this was in 1978. We lived in an attic apartment, and my husband was asleep next to me, and I suddenly was aware of a presence in the bedroom. And at the foot of the bed were two gray aliens. They call them gray. I didn't know what I call them, the little guys with the big black eyes. And I remembered panicking and thinking, oh my God, don't touch me. And I felt terror.
And you actually sketched them, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. I drew them for Budd so I could show him what they look like. And as soon as I thought to myself, don't come near me, don't touch me, immediately I felt calm. And then I remember sitting up in the bed, and I'm sitting in the bed. These two gray guys have this little black box in their hands, one of them in their hand, and it kind of just floats over to me on my lap on the bed. And I said, what is this? Can I have it? And I don't even remember saying it, but I'm thinking it. And this thing says no, but when you see it again, you'll know what it's for and how to use it. And then he takes it back, then they back away, and then they just fizzle out and disappear. And once they left, I could move again. And I tried to wake my husband up. I couldn't get him to wake up. And so I went to sleep. And I mean, I know that sounds absolutely crazy. Like, yeah, sure, that's exactly what I do. But I did. I just slid back down in the bed and I was out like a light. The next morning, I remembered all of it. And I was not dreaming. I told Charles I was not dreaming. I insisted it. He laughed at me, said, what did you eat for dinner the night before? You probably shouldn't eat that anymore. And I'm like, this is not funny. They were in our room and you would not wake up. And then I called my mother. He made me mad. So I called my mom and told her. And even years later, when Budd asked her about that, she's like, yeah, I remember when she called, she was so animated and so adamant that it was not a dream, that she was awake. Sure did. And so I'd had a few strange things happen before June 30, 83.
And there were other people there with you at that time, wasn't there?
On June 30, 83?
Yeah.
Yes, my mother was there when I went outside to when I had come back from where I had gone, because my mother had called me and said she thought somebody might be out in the yard, or she didn't say that. She said, I want you to come home right now. Let me start out saying I lived with my parents at that point. I was a single mom with two little kids, and I had moved back home. And I was getting ready to go cut some patterns for a friend of mine who was a seamstress who lived one street behind us. And as I was at the kitchen table washing my hand, or at the kitchen sink washing my hands, looking out the window, I noticed this odd light in the pump house of the swimming pool. And I pointed it out to my mom at the time, and she didn't seem too concerned about it. That it bugged me. I don't know, it bothered me. It was something didn't sit right. So when I got ready to leave, I decided to drive back around the side of the house to the turnaround and then back so I could get a look at the back of the house before I left, thinking prowlers, not aliens, not even close, and didn't see anything. But I did notice that the garage door was now open, the pedestrian door to the garage. It was attached to the house. I could see it from the back. Took me 1 or 2 minutes to get over to my friend's house, and I called Mom and told her that I had noticed the door was open. And again, she said, don't worry about it. Your father will be home. Daddy worked second shift at Ford at the factory, so he'd be home at about second shift time. And or when third shift would start. But so anyway, I said, okay, fine. So I hung up the phone, and as soon as I hung it up, she called right back. And I just picked it up on instinct, standing there. And it was with my mom. And she said, I want you to come home right now. And I'm like, why? Because my mom sounded scared. and my friend's husband was standing behind me, and he could see that I was upset about something, and he could hear that she had asked me to come home, and he said over my shoulder, tell her to call the police, that's what they get paid for, or something like that, to that effect. And she heard him, and she said, no, I don't want anybody here but you. And I'm like, okay. So I said to them, I'll be back, and I'll just go see what's going on, and I'll be back. So that's when I went back to the house, met my mom in the Florida room, grabbed Daddy's shotgun, which was not loaded. And I think either one of us said, my mom's like, do you know that's not loaded, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I said, well, they won't know it till I'm close enough to hit them with it, you know? So I went out looking around back by the workshop and by the swimming pool. And then I ended up in the garage. Didn't see anybody, didn't see anything amiss. But once I got into the garage, as I was standing in there, I suddenly felt like I was on fire. My whole body just felt like it lit up on fire, burning. And I remembered thinking, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And I headed to the pedestrian door. When I hit that open doorway, something hit me right in the chest, like right here. It was like a ball of white light. And it was so intense that I couldn't see anything but this white. And I know I had my eyes closed, but it was like coming through my eyelids, and it was spreading from where it hit me. I could feel it spreading my head, my arms, down my legs, and it's shaking. I was shaking to the point of vibrating. And it almost felt like I could feel like each individual molecule of my body vibrate independently of the other ones. You know, it was that intense, and it was painful. And I remember having the thought, oh my God, I'm dead. And then the vibrating kind of stopped. The light intensity got less and less. And I got to a point where I could open my eyes. And when I did, I realized I was not in the doorway anymore. I was out on the patio, which was probably about 20 feet or so from where I had been hit. And I don't remember walking there. I don't know how I got there. And I felt someone pull down on this shoulder, on my right shoulder, and I felt this burning sensation in my ear. And I heard someone, but I didn't see anybody. I heard a voice say, it was unfortunate that I had felt the pain. And when I was out there looking around, I realized that my vision was all wrecked. I had big blotches of white spots in my vision from that intense light, and my eyes were burning. And I couldn't move, but I could open my eyes, and I saw what I thought were kids in my mom's backyard, 6 child-size people. And I remember thinking, what are these kids doing in my mom's backyard? I hadn't seen this egg-shaped thing yet. And they were kind of moving from different areas in the yard, and they kind of lined up off to my right, up by the driveway. And then they started to glide towards me, but they weren't coming at me. And I started panicking because I thought they were coming towards me, but they actually were just going in front of me. And when I was following them with my eyes, then I saw the thing. Well, we call it a craft for lack of anything else to know to call it. But I don't know what that thing was. It was shaped like an egg, and it wasn't much bigger than the pump house of the swimming pool. I also don't think that it was fully on the ground because it seemed wobbly a little bit, just slightly. But my vision was fuzzy and splotchy. I could see that these people were children or people or whatever were small, child size. Their heads were larger than their bodies were kind of skinny. They all seemed to be the same size, same height, and they kind of glided and they didn't really walk. And then I noticed a ball of light about the size of a basketball out next to this egg-shaped thing. And it was about as high off the ground as I am tall. I'm 5'2". It went down real slow, and then it came back up again, and I felt like it was looking at me, and I don't know why. And then I at some point I thought, oh my God, my kids, because I remembered my kids were in the house. And were these things going to do something to my kids, you know? And as soon as I thought that, again, I heard that same disembodied voice say, your children are fine. And then the next thing I remember after that is hearing my name called. And when I did, it was like snap. It's like I woke up and I'm standing out on this patio and I can move. I don't see anything in front of me. I feel weird. I feel very creepy. I don't feel good. I don't feel right. I turned and walked towards the sound of the voice, which turned out it was my mom. She'd been standing in the kitchen doorway, and she said she doesn't remember exactly when, but at some point she opened the door and stuck her head out and called my name. And that's what I heard. That snapped me out of this. She told us a week later, she told me that she finally remembered why she called me to come home. She'd seen a basketball-sized ball of white light around the bird feeder, and she was trying to figure out if it was coming from a flashlight or a beam or something, but she couldn't see anything. It got smaller and smaller, and as soon as it disappeared, she got the thought in her head to call me and tell me to come home right now. And that's why she called me. Of course, she didn't tell me that till like a week later.
Oh,
But
so she had that experience with you, and was she there with the black craft as well?
she was there. I don't know.
Yeah.
She never said that. She never said it that she saw it. She said she saw the basketball-sized ball of light. So I don't know if she got shut off or what.
I've had this one experience that I can't understand how no one else could have seen it. And it was over my backyard, and I was sitting there, and I looked up, and it was like just as I was able to, I guess, perceive it, it was gone. So out of my peripheral, I could perceive it until I really looked at it. It was so quick, and it was a black craft, and it took up the whole portion of the sky that I was looking at, from sitting down and the garage was next to me, so it kind of blocked out some of the sky and stuff. And when I sat there afterwards, and I thought, no, that couldn't have happened, and if it did, how could that have just so silently it was silent. It was, yeah, blew my mind.
Well, that after that, the next day, my eyes were so bad. Mom took me to the emergency room. They were swelled shut, and it took several weeks for them to heal. And at that point, I started having I couldn't sleep at night. I could only sleep during the day. I was sitting in the bedroom between my two boys at night, like I was waiting for something, protecting them, And then a few days later, the family came out for the 4th of July weekend, because we have the pool, and that's when we discovered that mark in the yard. The mark in the yard stayed there for a couple of years. Nothing grew on it, and snow melted off of it for the first year. Dad's Geiger counter wouldn't zero in on it. The neighbors, we found out later, we didn't know it, but when Budd came and a few months later to start investigating, the neighbor next door to us, the same night that happened, she had witnessed what she thought was like a loud sonic boom and a bright flash from the backyard next to our yard. It shook her house. She said it shook the ground. It made her television screen turn red, and she started feeling panicky and paranoid and thought somebody was coming to get her. And the lady across the street from us, she was a night shift nurse at the local hospital, so she was in bed about to get up. It was about time for her to get up, but she was awakened before her alarm went off by what she said sounded like a jet aircraft about to crash into her house. She heard a boom, her house shook, and her lights flickered. And the odd thing was, all the clocks in the front of her house, which were closest to us, stopped. Only clock in the back of the house continued to run. And she didn't know what to think of it either. And so we had those two witnesses Budd found right away. And then 20 years later, someone, after he wrote the book Intruders, which is based off of that night and my family and my life, somebody wrote to him, this woman lived the road behind us, and our houses, our backyards were, there was a little small patch of wooded area between the two backyards. And she told Budd that her son and his friends used to love to spend the night out in the garage on the weekends. And the garage opened up to where it faced the garage would face what would be the back of our house if it weren't for the woods in the way. And she said the boys came running in one night terrified. She doesn't remember exactly which day, but she said the boys came running in terrified. They said they saw what they said were hundreds of basketball-sized balls of light floating through the woods between our house and theirs. And she went out there and didn't see anything. By the time she got out there, she couldn't see anything. But she said the kids were not playing. They were truly terrified. And they never spent the night in the garage again after that. It scared them so bad.
Wow.
So it was more than just me that night. And the mark in the yard. Also, there was a swath of trees along the side between our neighbor's house and our house that just like I don't know, like maybe a 5-foot swath of trees in the wooded area from the sky down. All the leaves turned yellow and wilted and then fell off long before the rest of the trees did. And we had a tomato plant at the edge of the driveway where the long streak of this thing was. And the tomatoes were the size of grapefruits, and the vines got as big around as my wrist. But the tomatoes were so acidy that you really couldn't eat them. They literally burnt your mouth. And I developed macular degeneration and severe cataracts by the time I was in my 30s. And I made it to my macular degeneration is stable and dry still. I get checked every 6 months and have for years. And they have me on the lutein and all that stuff. But I have had to have my lenses replaced. I have acrylic lenses in my eyes. And I feel with all my heart that night damaged my eyes. I don't feel that the injury to me was intentional.
I think a lot of us experiences seem to have sometimes these things happen. With me, it's a lot of like my uterus, like down in those sorts of areas. And I received the same. It's not intentional. And it's interesting, you know, like with all of that you went through, obviously your perception initially was quite fearful.
Yeah.
How has that progressed, and what has that changed? Has that turned around, and how, if so, how?
Yes, it has. And I'm not 100% sure how or why. After that, I had a few strange experiences, and I remember seeing them, before that night. But after that night, something changed. I've said it in several interviews, and if you've watched any, you probably heard me. That night when I got hit by that light, it was like Debbie died and Debbie 2.0 was born. Something changed. I thought I'm pretty sure I had a nervous breakdown at that point. And I had a rough year physically and mentally and emotionally. It was very rough. Thank God for my parents at that point. I mean, they stood by me. They understood. Mom knew something weird happened to me, no doubt about it. But I did go and I had a lot of therapy, but I didn't particularly talk to them about this stuff at that point. I do now. I have a great therapist, and she's even done PTSD treatments, EMDR treatments on me for that night in June of '83, which has been great. I mean, Budd always used to say, don't, in later years when I started to overcome the fear and the trauma of it all and pull from it strength, Budd would say, don't give them credit for that. That's you that did that. And that's true. But if I hadn't had the experiences that I had, I wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have. Because here's my perception of things. Like, if you read my book, you know that I watched my late husband, kill himself. I watched him shoot himself with a 12 gauge in our backyard. And that's a very horrible and traumatic thing to go through. But I learned that the farther down you go, I mean, to make it to visual, give it a visual, I am a little bean in a slingshot. And when life pulls me way down, the farther down it pushes me. When it lets go, the farther up I go. You see what I mean? So all of that scary, traumatic stuff that I went through in 83 and before that, and I had to learn, I'm a survivor, basically. I'm a survivor, and I had to learn how to deal with it. And I did go to therapy. I didn't particularly talk about these exact things, but I had the emotions and the anxiety to learn to deal with, which I worked on, which helped a lot. And like when my husband died, some things happened to me that told me death wasn't what I thought it was. And I had a near-death experience when I had my first child that told me death wasn't what I thought it was. And that changed something in me too. And I don't know why, but for some reason, I feel like there's a connection between that as well as the alien stuff and the paranormal stuff. It's all intertwined. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's hard to verbalize.
No, I know what you mean, because I have experienced the same things as well. I had a close call myself when I gave birth to my son, and I had to go and be operated on in emergency. I had, I know you've talked about some of the encounters you've had with the telepathic communication, as well, encountering someone at the shop who actually was speaking telepathically to you. I've had that exact same situation a couple of years before my son was born. And I do feel the same about, these experiences. When I had my son, things just started to really amp up more and more. It was, it is hard to verbalize, and especially when these little things are woven into just everyday life in every moment. They're not something that it's normal reality and then we have an experience. It's something where we're getting these little intrinsic pieces of information always.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm living in two different worlds at the same time, almost sometimes. It's like I got one foot in this world and I got another foot in this world. Yes. And also sometimes I wonder if I go somewhere else when I sleep, because especially at the end of my sleep, when I tend to have lucid, vivid dreams, they're so real. I dream in 3D. I dream in color. I'm in them. I'm not watching them. I'm living them.
Yes.
My lucid dreams are getting really weird.
Oh my goodness. We are going to have to do another catch up and talk about dreams, because I am exactly the same. Lucid every night, a whole other reality and overlapping realities. And just so much going on there, so much to delve into.
There is. I know and I've got a lifetime of all this stuff. So, I mean, I could literally talk your head off for hours. And I know that it's really hard for people to, sometimes I don't think we even have words to accurately describe what's in my head, because I keep feeling this desire to just want to get inside of you and just let you be me for a minute, and then you'll see, I wish I could. It would be so much easier. I sometimes wonder, I've had this conversation with other people and researchers, and sometimes I wonder if that initial contact of telepathic communication didn't flip a switch on in me that facilitated this, and it's just kind of took off, And I also feel like it's in everyone, but not everybody's switch has gotten flipped yet. I may have an extra wire or something up here that it's there in everybody, but they just ain't got plugged in yet, you know.
Time, they're plugging in. They're plugging in slowly but surely.
Oh yeah, it has changed a lot in 40 years. Yeah, it sure has.
The reason that I asked about the fear aspect is because I think that as more and more people experience this phenomena, it is hard to move past fear. It does take a lot of courage, and there may still be people out there struggling to comprehend, understand some of these experiences. And I guess I wondered what led you from a place of fear to then understanding that there was nothing to truly fear with these extra-dimensional beings.
Well, I had to get control of myself first because, I've often been my own worst enemy in life. My mind, my thoughts. I had anxiety even as a young person, and I had, after the June 30, 83 thing, I had 2 little kids and I was the only parent they had. I couldn't lose my mind. I had 2 little boys that depended on me. And I'm just stubborn and hard-headed enough that I decided that I had to do something about this because I have to live here. And I have 2 little boys that need me all in one piece. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let this take me down. So, I sought help for my anxiety, and I reached out to Budd. That was a big thing, to reach out to him. And then he connected me with people like me. And I talked about it. One thing I've learned with all of my traumas in life, like with my husband's suicide, and we were hit by a tornado in 2013 and lost everything. Everything. And we're lucky we didn't get killed. But talking about things and, putting it out, getting it out of me and into the atmosphere and, supporting, taking other people's support, thankfully, gratefully, and all kinds of stuff like that helped, talking to other people, networking. I started keeping a journal that would end up being 2 books. Writing everything down gives you a different perspective on things. And it was just sheer will that I didn't want to be. I was sick of being afraid. I was tired of being afraid, and I was tired of giving all my power. My mind, I'm telling myself, okay, look, I'm still here. I'm still alive. I still have my life. And as I got farther away from the scarier part of it, I could see clearer and begin to realize that, look, you're okay. Yeah, your eyes are wrecked, but that wasn't intentional. And also good things came from my life because of this. I've had people ask me now, if you could change and not have these experiences, and especially 83, would you not have them? And I said, no. After thinking about it, I wouldn't change a thing, because if it weren't for the experiences that I had, I wouldn't have become who I am now, which I like. Okay. I mean, there's always room for improvement, and my life would be unrecognizable. I wouldn't be married to the guy I'm married to now. I wouldn't have had the job that I had, the great job for 15 years. I wouldn't have met Budd. If I hadn't met Budd, I wouldn't have met my late husband, which I wouldn't have met this husband. I wouldn't live here. I mean, my son wouldn't have met his wife at Purdue. I wouldn't have a granddaughter. There's nothing about my life that would be recognizable today if I had not had these experiences. So no, I wouldn't trade them. And I can take that positive thinking about it, and it helps me to not, to let go of some of that fear and anger, because look at how much good came from it for me, as far as the rest of my life goes.
I mean, and look at the good that continues to come of it, by continuing to connect and like I've just sitting here today with you, I feel so absolutely blessed and guided. I feel a lot of resonance with you, your energy, your experiences, and I can, I commend you on being so courageous, being powerful, and being a voice in the community for everybody.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. I feel like, and I don't want this to sound like I think I'm, all that and a bag of chips, as the kids used to say. But I feel like all of this happened to me for a reason, and I was born for a reason, and I've felt driven all this time to connect with other people like me. And I feel like, I know I did the last documentary that I participated in on was called The Observers, and one of the last lines that I had in it, I had something about not being afraid, and I've met some experiences who are still in the trauma. They're still in the emergency room of this whole phenomenon. They're still, their trauma is still fresh, and they're still in a lot of pain. And I certainly don't want to ever diminish that, because I was there, I know. But sometimes they get a little angry with me, or they get a little disgusted with me, because I'm like, I don't act like it scares me anymore, which, I'm always going to have that element of shock, just because you just don't see them every day. But I really do believe that if I were to encounter something like that now, I would be not nearly as afraid as I was. I mean, I would be able to interact more. Philip Klass always used to say, why don't people grab a napkin or something from them? And I'm like, dude, you don't get it. When you're in it, all you can think about is, don't kill me. Please, just don't kill me.
There was that guy who gave his visitors some water or something like that, and then they made him a pancake. So I guess
I did. I remember hearing, yeah, it was like a dry cracker or something that he had.
Well,
the
the really interesting thing about that case was that it had no trace of salt whatsoever.
Huh. Yeah. There's just so much about life and the world around us, and I've just learned to embrace it. And, with having my thoughts changed about death, that's one of the main. Can you imagine how people would live their life if they never had to be afraid of dying? Would you see everything completely differently, with a whole different attitude?
I've had this conversation before, because when I really, it takes, part of you wants to say, like, I'm so happy for them that they could have moved on and they're in such a great place now, but the human is hurting, and that it requires that delicacy and compassion.
Mm-hmm. I know, but I go to funerals now, because at my age I go to more than I used to, for sure. But I don't cry, because I just know that they're probably standing right next to me, and that's cool. They're not in that hot mess suffering anymore. It's hard. It's hard to explain. Like I said, if you haven't been there, I got eclampsia and my organs failed, and I had to have a C-section 7 weeks premature, and both of us went home 7 days later, and this was 43 years ago. It was a miracle. So I'm back here for a reason.
And I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
I'm glad I'm here too.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for asking me. I appreciate it. Anytime I can help somebody, I'm here for the youngins.
All right, Deb. Well, I'll leave it there.